Good evening. Thank you for coming to Buckingham, and I also want to thank the community of Buckingham for welcoming us so warmly. My name is Tom Benevento, and I come from the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. I'm a parent. I'm a social ecologist, co-director of a sustainable living center in Harrisonburg, and I've had 20 years working in Guatemala and the Dominican Republic Haitian border in sustainable development and climate justice work there. I'm also on Governor Northam's Advisory Council on Environmental Justice. I will speak only on my behalf. 2 years ago, I spent a week with members of the Diné Navajo Nation in New Mexico and listened and learned from this community. I met with families and elders who were convinced having a gas pipeline through their community made sense, could make money, bring jobs, and would not pollute. They had the confidence of the regulators and the gas pipeline companies. Now they are suffering from air pollution and toxins. Meeting with elders and young, I found them sick from benzene, nitric oxide, carbon monoxide. As I traveled throughout the area, I was disturbed by the repugnant smells and often found myself with a headache. This past February, I also traveled to North Carolina in Robeson County and met with the Lumbee tribe. It was a similar situation, and the compressor station was built on Lumbee's sacred site land. As an advisory council member, I began listening and learning and doing research on the Atlantic Coastal Pipeline. Quickly, I realized I've been here before. I learned that the compressor station is being proposed on a predominantly historic Black community on a sacred ceremonial site, another vulnerable community like the Diné and the Lumbee. I learned Dominion has no emergency evacuation plan. I learned it is stated that the emission standards are stringent at 95% pollution reduction, yet we found no verifiable technology to meet these standards. I also learned U.S. energy demands have flattened out and the U.S. gas market is in a glut. This project is not needed. Many have thought that gas is the viable bridge fuel to low carbon energy like solar, but recent studies by NASA and Stanford University now show that transmission gas pipelines such as ACP leak methane at a rate of 5.7 to 10%. Anything over a 3% leakage emits a higher level of greenhouse gas than burning coal, as our previous person stated, 20 full-time coal-fired power plants. It's critical that we stop and take a look at the current reality in our world. Globally, we have record heat waves, record wildfires, record flooding, record drought, and Hurricane Florence is on its way. And those most vulnerable are the most affected right now. Global examples abound around the world showing us that more fossil fuels are not necessary. Stanford University research finds that the USA can transition to 100% renewable affordably within 15 years. Lastly, as Desmond Tutu says, we're made for goodness. Thank you.
I'm from Stanton in Augusta County. As you probably know, the pipeline will become a neighbor if it is built. I'm closer to the other side than the early side, as you can probably tell. So what I'm concerned with is, children. They're going to have to reap the benefits or the consequences of your decision, and I don't envy you your decision. I'd just like to take a time out here. Everybody take a deep, cleansing breath.
Sir, would you address your comments to the panel, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I would ask you to take a breath as well. Of course, a cleansing breath. You've been sitting up there for going on some time. Air, we all have that in common, as well as a water effect. The fact that we're going to allow or not allow, this company to put tons of very harmful chemicals into that air does not lend for many cleansing breaths. This pipeline, like many others, our compadres in Standing Rock called it a black snake. Here in this area, we have to have our own snake, and it's a green snake. And it goes for 600 miles from the fracked gas wells in West Virginia down, at this point, through North Carolina. It doesn't stop here. It doesn't stop in Virginia. Like it's been said, the need for the gas is not going to be given to you and I if you live in Virginia. It's going to go elsewhere, and elsewhere means overseas, I believe. That's for export. One question would be, why is the 218 permit estimates for higher volumes of sulfur oxides exceed the hazardous air pollutants for the 2017 permit application? The emissions health impact on the neighborhood from the Transco pipeline have not been measured. And why is that? This pipeline is already harming the public and the environment. At the last hearing, a gentleman talked about the pollution stopping at the fence, and that there would be no personnel stationed at. Boy, that's over quick, man.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
If you have others, make sure you get them.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Director Dowd, DEQ staff. Thanks for having us this evening, and thank you to the Buckingham and Union Hill community for having us this evening. My name is Peter Anderson, and I work for the nonprofit organization Appalachian Voices. I'm going to have written comments, so I'm just going to give you, some of them are pretty technical. I'm going to give you just a handful of observations and kind of preview those comments for you right now. So just going through the list here. First, continuous emission monitoring systems should be used instead of the proposed stack test in the draft permit. That's number one. Number two, this one's a little bit counterintuitive, but according to the draft permit's engineering analysis, both emission rates and overall total emissions are higher when the turbines operate below 50% capacity. So we would ask that the permit should either prohibit operation below 50% capacity or include these emissions within the potential to emit, or the PTE. Third, this one's pretty simple. Emissions rate limitations should apply to all regulated pollutants during startup and shutdown procedures, not just to the volatile organic compounds. Fourth, the community immediately surrounding the proposed compressor station has higher concentrations of elderly or the very young. DEQ and the Department of Health should conduct a baseline health impact assessment to determine the true risk to the Union Hill and Buckingham communities, particularly for respiratory illnesses. Fifth, addressing methane emissions. The draft permit does lay out several process regulations to address operational methane emissions and fugitive methane emissions. It doesn't use the word methane, it uses the word natural gas. However, the permit fails to place a numeric limit on methane emissions. A little brief observation, Virginia is poised to start regulating greenhouse gas emissions from electric power plants under Executive Directive 11. Ignoring the GHG emissions from infrastructure used to supply those power plants is self-defeating. So Virginia, as a matter of policy, should place stringent numeric limitations on methane emissions from any pipeline compressor station located in the Commonwealth to address emissions of this powerful greenhouse gas. And finally, it is the policy of the Commonwealth to, and I quote, ensure that development of new or expansion of existing energy resources or facilities does not have a disproportionate adverse impact on economically disadvantaged or minority communities. Now, according to the study conducted by my friend Dr. Lakshmi Fjord, the community within a 1.1 mile radius of this proposed compressor station is an environmental justice community. Over 85% of the households are African American, 33% descendants of freedmen. Numbers of elderly and very young are disproportionately higher than other age groups. Now, I've just given you several recommendations for improving the terms and conditions of the draft permit, but if the project cannot be built without a disproportionate adverse impact on environmental justice communities, and I submit to you that it cannot, the permit must be rejected. Thanks.
Divya Baird too. I'm with Friends of Buckingham. I'm the baseline testing project manager. You, DEQ and Dominion, assure us this compressor station would be the best in class, meeting all regulations. We like our air and water clean, and we don't want the tons of pollutants dumped on us that the regulations say are okay. Dominion tells us safety is first, but for 4 years now, we have asked for and have yet to see evacuation plans. An air permit would be granted without considering health and safety first, before considering worst-case scenarios. The Red Cross could easily help you figure things out, and they are motivated, even if our elected officials are not. We don't want anyone to live near a high-pressure 57,000 plus horsepower compressor station, which is highly explosive. Methane is not only highly explosive, it's also 87 times more of a greenhouse gas and ozone destroyer than is carbon dioxide, highly toxic, and an easy terrorist target. You tell us that you won't consider what we have repeatedly asserted, that there is no need for these pipelines. The owners of the Transco pipeline, as you've heard, have said there are enough pipelines in place to meet demand. It's well known that renewables are far more economical. You insist that you will narrowly evaluate just the air permit, yet this permit is the last piece to greenlight the whole shebang. You will ignore that the NAACP has asked for a halt to the ACP and the MVP. The Governor's Advisory Council on Environmental Justice has asked for a moratorium. FERC has issued a stop work order for non-compliance. We ask for a 30-day extension of the comment period, and prior to permitting, the DEQ must require and complete a quantified risk assessment and work with other state agencies to conduct a health risk assessment and health impact assessment. This would counter the compartmentalization of hazards to water, from hazards to air, from safety, environmental justice, health impacts, from a mix of pollutants, site suitability, need, etc. As baseline testing project manager for Friends of Buckingham, I went to the local, then regional, health departments to ask for assessments. They sent me on to you, the DEQ, who also said no. We were left to defend for ourselves. Thus, we did the right thing, taking up the hefty project of testing 30 well water sites close to the 26 miles of proposed ACP in Buckingham. We have done air monitoring for particulate matter VOCs, formaldehyde, hydrogen sulfide in 8 homes around the compressor station site and are in the process with health surveys. We're also monitoring the 36 stream crossings by the ACP, including 7 floodplains. This testing should be a standard requirement for any potentially polluting industry, but for this to be a regulatory requirement would be admission of the dangers. You, the DEQ, fiddle with Dominion while the planet burns.
Okay. Hi, my name is Trish. I am from Radford, Virginia. My zip code 24141. To begin with, I want to offer my thanks to the many arms wide open from those who were once strangers, but now my family. In my work this last year, I've traveled across from Virginia from the north to the south, west to the east part of the state to meet with others, share stories, support one another, and even pray. To the board, I thank you for your time. As we all know, these processes are not easy to endure, these long hearing processes. They are especially not so for the community members like those in this room who have been having to do so for years now, several years now, without paid attorneys and staff, which are plentifully afforded to the DEQ and its appointed boards. I wanted to offer some other information which I think the board should consider, and will do so by pointing out DEQ's former exceptions and how they may be a sign of what would be to come if the Air Board does not do the right thing for this community and deny the permit. According to the DEQ, the Radford Arsenal releases some 9 million pounds of toxins from the plant annually, most being nitrate compounds stemming from the process that neutralizes acids to make explosives. In the agency's toxic release inventory report for 2013, the Arsenal once again topped Virginia's list of polluters. The annual report has frequently listed the plant. In 2017, the DEQ fined the Radford Arsenal $243,000. That is a drop in the bucket for a billion-dollar corporation that manages the arsenal. The next thing I want to point out is the violations that have occurred on the Mountain Valley Pipeline in the other part of the state. Over 350 violations have been documented and reported and are in the process of being submitted. I have personally reviewed all of the inspection reports on the DEQ website, which only range between 40 and 45 so far recorded. So I submit to you that if the permit goes through for this compressor station, what are the assurances that Dominion or the next company or the next company or the next company is going to be treated any differently than the Radford Arsenal or the Mountain Valley Pipeline? I believe that the Atlantic Coast Pipeline will be given the same exceptions. I believe that the violations will go unaccounted for. I believe that they will be fined by the DEQ, $100,000, $200,000, maybe $300,000. They're a billions-dollar corporation stealing the air from this community, from all of us, just like the other projects that the DEQ is tasked with protecting its citizenry from. They charge you to represent us. I ask that you do that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Our next, for those that are still in the audience,
My name is Marie Gillespie. Before I start, I just want to say I'm sorry we had to have these hearings on the day of such historic sadness memorial for 9/11. I want to make sure we remember those, and especially have a affinity due to my home being New York, former home. Again, as I said, my name is Marie Gillespie, and I live in my home with my husband Silas, Union Hill, and I always say the first house on Union Hill. We have acreage which we purchased over 25 years ago. We came to Buckingham County at the urging of relatives who encouraged us to take advantage of such a beautiful countryside, clean air, good clean springs, and well water. We purchased land and we could hardly contain our eagerness to retire and relocate to Union Hill, an area looked upon as a historical, thriving, respectful community populated by many descendants of freedmen. We were excited about living in an area where formerly populated by slaves that may have been some of our relatives, friends, or even family members. This was indeed a place we wanted to be. I am here to ask you to reject the application for the permit for the ACP pipeline, for air permit, relative to the construction of the pipeline and the compressor station. As the gentleman said before, I am too scared because I live adjacent to the pipeline and a few yards from the compressor station. Before sharing my pain regarding the project, I requested the agency add some extension to the public hearing, and I hear that you have, and I appreciate that. With a few remaining minutes, I would like you to know how I feel about the close proximity of the compressor station and the pipeline. My concern for our family members, including that of my asthmatic daughter and granddaughter, who visits regularly. I'm concerned about the hazard to the water, to the air, and each one of us, the toxic pollutants and emissions of both. How can you assure me that our health will not be compromised? What has been done to assess the long-range effect on our health? The figures given by Dominion are based on modules that don't actually represent or reflect the current health of the African American population of Union Hill. I also request that you do a comprehensive risk assessment to consider the health effects, the air and the water. I cannot believe that there wouldn't be some change. I'm almost paralyzed when I fear that my well will be undrinkable and the air polluted. When I hear the... Thank you.
Hello, my name is Beth Roach and I live in Richmond, Virginia, 23224. I am representing myself today, although I must bring with me the intersection of my other life roles, which is I'm a community organizer for a group called Mothers Out Front. I am on the Tribal Council of the Nottoway Indian Tribe of Virginia, and I also serve on the Advisory Council on Environmental Justice. And what I'd like to share with you tonight is, I had some comments permitted, and I'm going to submit them in writing later, but it's really more of my reflections of what's happening tonight, and I feel compelled to represent myself tonight to you as an ancestor. And what that means to me is bringing with me the ancestors that have lived on this land for thousands of years. As a Nottoway woman, I'm Iroquoian, and when we have gatherings such as this, we always start with a Thanksgiving prayer, which I'm only going to give you the tiniest snapshot. And it would sound like this: Yagruwe Uodase Ifne Ufne. And that's how we begin our prayers, and that's how we begin our gatherings. And what that means is today we give thanks for all the people. And so I'm very grateful for you all. I'm very grateful for everybody in this room. And I'm deeply grateful to the citizens of Union Hill and Buckingham and how they have completely embraced all of us and helped to tell their stories. And our stories are so important. The prayer goes on to say, today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one and we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. And now our minds are one. So tonight you've heard amazing testimonies of scientific and legal and personal accounts of all the effects that are going to happen. And so I beg you to please think of yourselves as an ancestor and listen to those stories and bring that mind into one. As a member of the Advisory Council of Environmental Justice, I've heard just so many testimonies of these folks, and there's no doubt that this is an environmental racism issue. And I hope that gentleman has witnessed all the stories tonight, because his question earlier, what is environmental racism, would be clearly answered. It's definitely an environmental justice issue. Tonight there was a mention of Cypress Creek power plant and Dendron, and that's very close to where I'm from. So being among this community, I truly understand the pain and the horror that they are anticipating. And so I I bring with me also the memory that things can be done to overturn, big, impactful decisions that are going to do the things that people are worried about tonight. So I'm just very grateful for all of us here, and thank you for your time. And I'd just like to also remind us of the 7 generations, which is the Iroquois Law of Peace. If you think back 7 generations, you're around the time of those freedmen, so let's remember them. And let's also just keep in mind the current ancestors of this land and all their children going forward. So let's think ahead to that 7 generations and what kind of world do we want to be. So thank you. One Nawe.
And I'm with the Virginia Student Environmental Coalition. In spring 2016, 17 friends of mine were arrested in the lobby of the DEQ. We were occupying that space because we found out that Dominion was secretly dumping coal ash wastewater into our rivers, and we wanted answers. How was this allowed to happen? The best explanation that we ever got was that money and favors were being exchanged between David Paler, the director of the DEQ, and Dominion. So I don't trust Dominion. When they say stringent permits, I don't believe them. When they say clean natural gas, I don't believe them. And when they pretend to show concern for this community, I don't believe them. We've already seen them lying on this project. They said that local labor would be used, and the people who came in to cut down the trees of Buckingham County were from Utah, according to their license plates. So why should we believe them? We still have many questions. How far will the pollutants travel? How will emissions affect our health? What about people who already have pre-existing respiratory issues? We've been fighting this pipeline and this compressor station in Union Hill for 4 years now. And after the folks who are here from the fossil fuel industry and from Dominion finish speaking in favor of the compressor station tonight, they get to go home to Richmond or Northern Virginia, or I think someone said Connecticut. And Union Hill will still be here, facing the threat of a future with polluted air and undrinkable water. The Air Board has the power to stop this compressor station and this pipeline once and for all. You do not have to accept this permit, and we demand that you do not accept this.
For being here tonight, I'm Swami Guru Charanananda from Yogaville. Whether it's interesting to you or not, but I'm going to be 90. And I tell you, after all these happy years and all of these years of living in peace and harmony and avoiding situations that are deceptive, situations that are manipulative, situations that are not facing up to the science, to facts, and are reaching for their pocket to see how much money is coming in to defend their statement. It hurts. It really hurts to see the communities and to people in general to be swallowed up in the political and economical situation. And all of us know that that pipeline and that compressor is not necessary. We know that. In fact, 3 or 4 years ago, people were visiting us from Dominion, and I asked, I said, how long do you think this can go? And they said, oh, well, we have figured maybe 8 years of, at most 10, of natural gas is still available. Well, what are you going to do with this compressor and pipeline after there is no more gas? What are you going to do with it? All the harm that has been given to people in the area is something you cannot turn it around. You can't remake it. So please give it thought in your heart. You're not just standing up there for your own shirt and food. You're representing all these people who are not able to pass a law or to affirm a law. Live your conscience, live your life. We wish the best for everybody. And let us do our part. God bless you. Thank you.
Air permit. Thank you.
I'm from Waynesboro, Virginia, which is in Augusta County. We've had many speakers here tonight who've spoken eloquently and compellingly on the law, statistics, reviews, traditions. I'm not here to speak about that. I'm here to speak about the people, the individuals who live in Union Hill and Yokaville. In the last few months, I've had a very special opportunity to get to know many of those who dwell in this area and whose very lives and their ability to live a healthy, peaceful existence have been impacted by this proposed compressor station and the ACP. I've learned about their history. I've learned about their present lives, which are so similar to yours and to mine, wherever we reside. What has struck me tonight is hearing the people who speak for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the compressor station are mostly people who don't live here. They get to go home to Richmond and Chesapeake and other areas. This historic community was founded, as you've heard many times tonight, by freed men who were former slaves, who were bought and sold to work this land. And it is their descendants who live here now who are nurturing this special sacred land. I witnessed a video on YouTube, yay internet, of members of this community discovering the unmarked graves of their ancestors while someone was reading the cost of their sale to local landowners. These human slaves had to work the land that now Dominion wants to build their 54,000 horsepower compressor station upon, which will pollute the water, the soil, and the air that they breathe. How can anyone not be moved by the continued theft of their rights to live peacefully and healthfully on their own land? And here we remember the definition of what environmental racism is. The legal definition is environmental racism refers to intentional or unintentional targeting of minority communities or the exclusion of minority groups from public and private boards, commissions, and regulatory bodies. It is the racial discrimination in the enactment or enforcement of any policy, practice, or regulation that negatively affects the environment of lower income or racially homogeneous communities. I ask you to reject this.
Why this pipeline isn't necessary, that the current infrastructure is sufficient to carry the gas that's produced. Also, we've heard that the gas that's being produced is dwindling a lot, and there's huge financial problems for the producers. So it's pretty obvious that this pipeline may be a very short-term project and be obsolete in the long run. Also, I've heard that that Dominion is using thin wall pipe to build this line, which may speak to the short-term aspect of it in their eyes. I'm not sure. But if that's true, anyone who's done plumbing knows that thin wall pipe is much more subject to corrosion and breaking. So one thing I would ask of you guys is to check and see if that's true. If they're not using the best pipe, they should be, because there'll be a lot more leaks and a lot more possibility of explosions. And that has to do with air quality. Also, the interconnection of pipes throughout the Atlantic seaboard would allow them to sell gas overseas, which would be a federal crime. It's a violation of eminent domain for anything other than domestic production. So if they are going to sell it overseas and ruin thousands of people's lives in the process, that's, unconscionable. The EPA years ago put out what they call ProFact Sheet 401, which allows for bypass pipes to be used at compressor stations. This would eliminate most of the emissions at compressor stations. It connects the high pressure and the low pressure side instead of using blowdowns, so blowdowns would be eliminated. So I'm asking you to, if this line goes through, to ask that a bypass pipe be put in place, that sound walls be put around the compressor station to reduce the sound and provide a better view for the neighbors. And spray foam could be used inside the compressor station, which would also reduce sound. None of you would want to have your family be subject to particulate matter or carcinogens or neurotoxins, and no one else should be either. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Swami Sugunananda. I live in Yogaville for the past 18 years. When I came here this afternoon, I thought that this was going to be a meeting for Buckingham and surrounding county residents to express their feelings, their worries, and concerns. And I was really, really shocked and surprised and baffled to see that people drove long distances to come and speak in favor of a compressor stations. Why would anybody give up their day to do this? It's like the Twilight Zone. What happened to honesty? What's going on here? I moved here 18 years ago to heal myself. I was very sick at the time. The clean air alone, the water, clean water, the environment healed me, when the doctors and allopathic medicine could not heal me. So not only myself, but many other countless people, thousands have come to Yogaville for this reason, to heal themselves. Yogaville, Buckingham, our friends nearby, they're sacred. It's a sacred place. Because what makes it sacred? It's the cleanliness of the air, the water, the environment. because God is there, because it's so clean. I am shocked that anyone would consider polluting our nature, our air, our water, when we know very well that our health and our lives and mental, emotional well-being depend on the nature around us. We're part of nature. We are nature. Pollute nature and we're polluting ourselves. It is not a very good karma. The ill health effects have been documented by communities around compressor stations. So, the private company Dominion does not have the right to poison our air, our water, our land, and our lives, to take away our quality of life, our happiness for their own private monetary gains. Please check in with your hearts. You're our representatives. Check in with your moral and ethical code. Stand up for what's right and deny Dominion this air permit. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my name is Alex. Yeah, I'm from traditional Monacan territory up the valley there.
I'm sorry, could you identify yourself?
Alex? Yep. Yeah, and I'm here just as a friend, mostly of some of the folks at Union Hill. I don't speak on anybody's behalf, but I've been making friends with some of them over the last few months, and I've come to really recognize the depth of how much they've struggled. Been at every meeting, at every hearing over the last 4 years to defend their lives, to defend their children's lives. So I really honor that. Yeah, I'm going to build on somebody else's comment. So you take a community that is mostly black, whose ancestors' black bodies were bought, sold, and used on this very site where the compressor station is supposed to be built. Then you have the direct ancestors of those very slave owners selling that land to a wealthy business to build a compressor station. Land sold to build a compressor station, not in a rich neighborhood, not in a white neighborhood. Built amidst a community of descendants of slaves. Continuing a history from burning their courthouse, as we heard earlier, to burning their children's lungs, to building on their ancestors' graves. Then you host a public comments hearing fully escorted by 24 patrol cars belonging to an institution which directly descends from the slave patrols that hunted black bodies in this very land. Dominion wants to build in Union Hill because Dominion Energy sees black bodies as invisible, doesn't see them as valuable, doesn't see them as somebody who could challenge their money making. Frankly, I guess the last thing I'll just say is it's pretty disturbing to stand here and see all of us sitting in this room having a conversation about whether we should or shouldn't build a compressor station that would put black bodies in danger of having many, many different kinds of toxins pumped into their bodies. And knowing that we're part of this history of racial violence and that we live in a place where that's clearly evident.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
In Charlottesville currently. I am involved with the Virginia Student Environmental Coalition and was a part of the project in Union Hill that Lakshmi mentioned, in which we went door to door, surveying the residents nearby to the compressor station of their family history, their cultural heritage, and their health concerns, the job that Dominion was supposed to do and did not. During this time, I got to know the residents of Union Hill and their families, their land, their gardens, their animals, and their churches. all of it in jeopardy because of the proposed compressor station. We are not surprised that Dominion decided to build the compressor station in this community, a predominantly Black community, one that has been living here for generations upon generations, a community of freedmen. In fact, the proposed compressor station is on the site of a former plantation. This is clear environmental racism. Dominion thought they wouldn't get a fight here, but they are so wrong. We cannot trust Dominion to keep this community safe. We have seen it fail time and time again, like when they allowed toxic coal ash dumping into the Virginia rivers, and now when they've allowed numerous water violations and contaminations with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. We have many questions, even after 4 years, still unanswered. There are many pre-existing conditions, health conditions in Union Hill, including asthma, chronic bronchitis, pneumonia, lung conditions, and cancers. These will most definitely be exacerbated with added pollutants from the compressor station. What are the long-term effects from toxic emissions emitted by this compressor station and its peak blowdowns? What are the effects of pollutants on nearby schools, like the one we are in currently? Dominion has shown itself as the corrupt, greedy, racist corporation we all suspected it was. I hope the Air Board proves to us it will not be the same and will listen to the community directly impacted. Reject the air permit application.
Deli, and I am a resident of Buckingham County, and I reside at Yogaville. You've heard all the stats, and I'm tired, and I think you're tired too. But you've heard all the negative impacts that this proposed compressor station is threatening us with. You've heard about the amazing people in Union Hill and their struggle, and you've also heard about the rebuttal of people that are living here, breathing this air and enjoying every moment of being in nature and surrounded by the most amazing environment that I could ever imagine. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not from here, but I love it here because of all the reasons I just stated. It's a healing place, and it's pristine, and it should remain so. I don't hold very much with Dominion. I think that they are cutthroats and money-grabbing, deceitful, very low-level people. And I'm sorry, but they've proven themselves over and over again to be just that. And I'm thinking of all the people that not only live here, but that visit here. I belong to a community of between 250 and 300 people strong, but that doesn't even come close to the amount of guests that we welcome to our community every single day. These people come here in search of healing and learning and nature and getting away from the vastness of society with all its public transportation and air pollution and all, and they love it here. They feel healed and renewed. And I'm worried that all of this is going to be taken away from not only us, but those people too, that travel all over the world to get to us. It's powerful what we're doing. And I'm imploring you to reach into your hearts. There has to be a time when we come to the realization that human beings are worth more than just money. That comes, that goes. But humanity is supposed to be the most important thing on this planet, and we're all united in this together. I feel like we're all in one big ship, and it's just gone askew. We've lost touch with our sole purpose of being on this earth. I don't think accumulating billions and billions of dollars is really very, very conducive to anybody's well-being. But people and the environment and our wildlife that stand to be in jeopardy of this proposed pipeline and compressor station, we are all at risk for this. The people that have struggled in Union Hill for hundreds and hundreds of years, I don't even know how they could have come up with putting a compressor station in their front yards after all they've been through. It just makes no sense. And I'm not very high educated. I have barely a college degree, but I can see what's right and I can see what's wrong, and this is just plain wrong. It's wrong. And I'm certain that if you really search deep down inside, you'll all feel that way. So thank you for letting me speak.
I'm Jessica Sims from Richmond, Virginia, and I've been lucky enough to come to know the sacred beauty of Buckingham. It's pristine and clean air, as I've canoed the James River in Buckingham for a number of years with my father. In the time fighting against the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, I've come to know the warm and welcoming community of the county and of the surrounding counties. Tonight we heard from petroleum executives telling us falsehoods about the affordable natural gas, and I'm putting natural in quotations. We've heard further falsehoods about how important it is for our national security. These are false claims. The existing fracked gas pipeline infrastructure in Virginia is sufficient to meet domestic needs for decades. The ACP is intended for export. It will not help Virginians. It will not help anyone in Buckingham. The ACP is a Dominion money grab, and their grotesque abuse of their power in Virginia and over our legislature has made this happen and gotten us to this point. Installing a 54,000 horsepower compressor station would introduce nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, and particulate matter into the air. With an annual estimation of 43.2 tons of particulate matter released from the proposed compressor station, it would lead to premature mortality, aggravation of respiratory and cardiovascular disease, and decreased lung function. The community of Union Hill does not deserve this, and I ask that you prevent this from occurring. It would introduce 7.69 tons of volatile organic compounds, which would increase difficulty for breathing and potentially damage the central nervous systems of those that live near the compressor station. I would ask that you please protect Union Hill and not allow this to happen. And finally, 43.4 tons of nitrogen oxides would be released annually. This would cause an inflammation of airways and decrease lung function for those living near the compressor station. I would ask that you please protect the community of Union Hill, not allow this to happen, and deny the permit. Thank you.
Stacy Lovelace from Midlothian, Virginia. I'm here tonight as a mother, and because I believe all children and all people have the right to clean air, clean water, and a livable future on this planet. All children and all people. Earlier, a man who came up here asking what environmental racism is actually exemplified it. He, a white person, said he didn't want oil and gas transport trains polluting the water he and his grandkids swim in. So he was here to support a gas pipeline, putting a polluting compressor station in a black community instead. That's environmental racism. DEQ has also not done its job immaculately, as some seem to claim, and DEQ's judgment is obviously and consistently flawed. Seeing as a U.S. News study found Virginia to be the worst in the entire country, all 50 states, in toxic pollution per square mile. And the majority of that is from Dominion. This disproportionately impacts communities of color and low-income communities across the state. I'm also here as a chemical engineer, and I've gone through the permit and engineering analysis. There are too many reasons to say why the permit is woefully inadequate in this short 3-minute allowance you give, so you'll get that later in my written comments, but I want to underscore that the permit is woefully inadequate. And even though the permit is inadequate, no amount of life-destroying pollution should be forced upon the Union Hill community, or any community, or on our Mother Earth. Especially when we have the renewable energy technology that renders the need for pipelines obsolete. Please deny the permit.
Rockingham County, Virginia. I represent Raptors, that's the Rockingham County Alliance for the Protection and Transformation of Our Resources and Society. I'm asking you all at the DEQ tonight to deny this permit for a long list of reasons, which you can see later in my comments submitted via email, but I'd like to highlight a few other things tonight, in addition to Friends of Buckingham's 106 unanswered questions as to the inadequacies and deficiencies of the draft permit. There's been a troubling trajectory in the DEQ over the last year and a half or so in regards to the permit applications and approvals for this pipeline as well as the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And my I have a deep concern that the job that has been given to you by the leadership of the DEQ, David Paler and others, is to approve this permit no matter what the cost, as the DEQ approved 401 water quality certification or recommended its approval to the State Water Control Board. It seems to me that the good work of a lot of intelligent, well-meaning people has been hijacked by someone who sees themselves as a negotiator between industry and communities like Union Hill, Buckingham County, and not as a regulator. DEQ has failed to enforce regulations on Mountain Valley Pipeline. We see it in Southwest Virginia every day. So I would highly suggest that folks in the DEQ ask themselves, if you approve this permit, though it is woefully inadequate, will you be able to enforce the regulations? Will you have the numbers to do it? Because when it comes back to this, it seems like, it's always, we're underfunded. We don't have enough people to do this. We don't have enough people to get out to Southwest Virginia and talk about 8 inches mud burying roads in Franklin County. This situation in Buckingham County is a deal with the devil, and Dominion and ACP, the permit applicant, are not to be trusted whatsoever. They come in here and they want to wine and dine folks and tell them that it's a done deal and there's nothing they can do about it, and we're going to give you this and we're going to give you that, we're going to give you a school or community center, whatever, and it's a bunch of lies. If ACP, which is a little better than a shell company, gave one single damn about this community, this permit application would not be in.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Lainey Sullivan. I'm a resident of Richmond, Virginia, 23225. But I'm also part of the international community of Yogaville, because as was stated before, Yogaville is a community that is global, and many of us come from the city and from other parts of the world to go there, particularly to breathe. There's this teaching by the guru, Satchidananda, that the most powerful, you think of yoga as like postures, moving your body, but he said the most powerful type of yoga besides the mind stuff that you can do is the breath work, because it regulates the prana in your body, which is your vital life force. So there's some very complicated religious issues that are going on with the pollution of air in Buckingham County and its relation to Yogaville. I also have been available and at many of these hearings and following very closely all the Water Control Board and Air Control Board, and I'm very deeply disturbed by how I feel as though, as a citizen, my rights are diminishing. From the way that I'm treated at the front door by DEQ representatives acting as though they're the police and trying to take articles of clothing from me before I walk in the door and sticking the police officers on me, to the fact that there's only one member of the control board here that's going to vote right now. Where are the other 6? And how are they going to get our comments? Are they going to listen? Are they going to hear? I mean, our tax dollars that we pay in Virginia is going to fund, I know that you all are volunteer board and on the board, but the rest of the DEQ, we are paying for you, and your clients are these corporations that are stealing our resources and endangering our lives through polluting our air and our water, and you're creating permits to give them permission to pollute the bodies of water and the air bodies and our bodies. And that's not fair. And then you put us in these rooms, and you're not going to make a vote because you can't make a vote. And I understand that, that's fine, but I feel like this is fake. Like all of this is just for us to feel like we have some kind of process, but there is no process, because it's been rubber stamped. Every single meeting I've gone to has been rubber stamped, and I've been going to these meetings for 4 years. Every single one. So I'm really frustrated, but thank you for listening to me, and I hope that you all set a precedent and exercise your power in a different way.
My name is David Ball, and I'm a resident of Buckingham County. I came here about 15 and a half years ago, and I served for 8 years on the Soil and Water District as an elected director from the county. In 2015, when this pipeline was brought out, I looked at the plans. I've got degrees in science, experience in engineering, construction. I looked at it and I said, there's something wrong with the design. I pointed out how there was going to be all these turns and everything was going to slow stuff down. In 2015, they put this out with a 36,000 horsepower compressor station. They must have gone back and reviewed my comments, because it then became a 57,000 horsepower compressor station. And I would imagine that if they did construct this and put it into practice, they'll probably want to go to a 70 or higher. The other thing is, I studied from when I was in middle school, meteorology. One of the things that you don't talk about here is the fact that we have really hot summers, and we get something called Bermuda High. And that air just sits for weeks, and the temperature goes way up, and the air becomes stagnant. And you're gonna have a compressor station that's cranking out at maximum capacity, putting all these particulate pollutions into the air that aren't gonna go anywhere, because there's no breeze, there's no air, it just sits. And the air becomes caustic, and it threatens people's health. And as it spreads out, it gets into the stream valleys, works its way down as a fog on the James. That's terrible. You look at this. Transco said this pipeline isn't necessary. They can supply all the natural gas. This pipeline is probably about a quarter mile from my house. You look at the fact that they're investing in the Mountain Valley pipeline because this is held up in federal court. So why are we here if this is held up in federal court? Why are we moving forward and spending taxpayer dollars when this isn't a done deal? It's still tied up in FERC. It hasn't come out because the federal court has tied this up. What are we wasting taxpayer dollars for? There are just so many negatives here, and I just wonder why we have to persist. If you put a wall around that compressor station and somebody had to go in there to service that compressor station, that air would be so toxic, they'd have to wear a hazmat suit and oxygen tanks. And that's how bad that air would be, because it would be deadly. And that's what we want to pollute our communities with. And that's unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. And we need to be accountable.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Irene Leach. I am a native of Buckingham County, 23921. To me, it's really ironic that today on 9/11 we are having this hearing. We've been told so many times that this is going to be safe, and I don't believe it. And the fact that we're doing this on 9/11, my life experiences are a big part of why I don't think this is something we can count on being safe. My husband worked on the renovation of the Pentagon, and in fact, he had worked for several years prior to the accident or the bombing that occurred, and a lot of people knew it. He worked on the part that was hit and lost people that he knew. And I brought, a year later, they had built it back, and I brought one of the things that he got a year later. He's probably going to shoot me if he finds out that I did this, but I figured it was proof that, Randy could have been at the Pentagon when that was hit. He happened to be a block from the White House, that's all. And I work at Virginia Tech and have lived through the shootings and so forth, so I know the bad things happen. When this thing started, we were told your air is so clean that you can afford the pollution. Hasn't done much to make me be confident about the process. People today have told you all kinds of things that need to be done. I'm concerned because it's a piecemeal process that doesn't look at the whole thing. I don't know how we're going to be able to enforce things. I've been told that there are no studies on the impact of farm animals, of the pollution, and my family's business for the last 116 years has been to raise cattle and the food that feeds them and that feeds us. And I was raised that it's my job to pass that on to the next generation. But with this pollution and with all the risk that we're being exposed to because we can afford it, I don't know what the future holds. We deserve better than this.
My name is Maya Stewart Silver. I grew up in Afton, Virginia, and I'm now a resident of Crozet, Virginia. I have huge concern about the ACP's Union Hill Compression Station. I have three main concerns to voice in this comment. Firstly, I strongly feel that we deserve the right for an additional 30-day extension for public comment. This initial 30-day period for public comment has not been enough time for the Union Hill residents and the greater public to become adequately informed on the vast and very complicated documents and information that was only very recently released. And therefore, the public has not been given fair opportunity to even come up with all their valid questions and expression of reasonable and justifiable concern. Secondly, I am also asking for the Department of Environmental Quality to complete a quantified risk assessment for the Buckingham compressor station immediately, and to work with other state agencies to complete a health impact assessment and a health risk assessment. It feels very basic to me that before putting anything into action, there needs to be thorough steps taken to make sure that any health risks are assessed and that the local citizens of the area are not becoming victimized by unjust environmental impacts from Dominion's action. And finally, I have deep concern about the impact on this primarily African American low-income population that makes up the Union Hill community. This tendency of Dominion to have this type of environmental impact in historically marginalized communities that often results in disproportionate health risks is a trend that needs to be seriously questioned and examined. In summary, I am asking for an additional 30 days for a total of 60-day public hearing period. Also, I am asking you to look very seriously into the health risks of the local citizens before allowing any actions from Dominion. And finally, I am pushing for deep questioning of the environmental and racial injustice occurring. Thank you very much for your consideration.
With the last 2 minutes. My name is Alia Stewart Silver, a sister of Maya who just spoke. Also grew up in Afton, Virginia, and now live in Crozet. Just recently moved back from California. There's so many things to say. I think what I want to focus on right now is just the intersections that feel so clear to me and so many other speakers who've spoken here tonight. Intersections related to race, class, health, and environmental injustice. To begin with, it feels really important to just recognize that some of the estimates that Dominion put out were really lowballed a lot of the numbers, like 600% undercounting of the population that live in that immediate area. In addition, like 83% of that population is African American or Native American, which I know has been discussed. The fact that this actual land itself was used as a plantation where a lot of the descendants who now live in this area were enslaved, to me just feels so blatant and horrific to think that from owning people's bodies to then selling that very same site to be able to do work and have the impact on the environment that would in other ways degrade and dehumanize lives just feels it's like nightmarish. It feels very dystopian to me that we could be even considering to use the same site where there are unmarked slave sites and burial grounds of Native American people and slaves. We're not even looking at how we're going to account for that in terms of the cultural recognition of that, and we would continue possibly to
use our own unconscious privileges and biases to have moneyed elites be able to use land to hurt and dehumanize people's bodies and lives. So that really stands out to me as really, really disturbing. As I sit with that as someone who has white skin and a lot of privileges, it feels very important for me as a community member in the larger community to stand up in whatever way I can to say that this is not what I stand for and not the direction that I think our country, our state, and our local governments can take accountability for the impact this has on the earth and people's bodies. I feel like the direction forward for our people, more largely as a species, is to be able to look at the harms that have been done, to be able to help what has been fragmented in terms of our relationship to the earth, our relationship to each other, our relationship also to the greatest source and spirit that directs the ability for us to know that we're in this together as one human community that needs to address climate change, and this is not the direction that we need to be moving in order to have the world that we all know is possible of love, connection, belonging, intimacy, possibility, vibrancy, abundance, which is true. It's a true fact that that's possible for us, and this is not the direction that we move in to be able to get there. Thank you.